Are there any other famous Christian martyrs?
So focusing on martyrs, true Christian martyrs that aren't in the Bible. That's the question, right?
Yep.
All right. So there's a book, and some people may have heard of it. It's called John Fox's Book of Martyrs. And so it actually gives an account of like martyrs that happened in the early church, and then into Protestantism. So, for example, it records like the martyrdom of the remaining apostles. So, for example, James, we know, died in Scripture, but then it records the martyrdom of the other apostles as well, and specifically how they died, like how they died, where they died, when they died. It includes the martyrdom of other individuals outside of the apostles, like Paul and Barnabas and Luke. So it starts off obviously with like Stephen, who we said was the first martyr, and then goes to James, who we know is the next one. And then it talks about how Philip was actually martyred. And Philip was one of the original apostles, but he was one of the, like Stephen, chosen as one of the 7 deacons in the early church. Matthew, who was with Jesus, when he was slain in AD 60.
So all this is extra biblical.
Where you have these accounts, and so you're taking it from other historical accounts that are happening at that time. And so you've got individuals, even like Jesus' brother James, who wrote the letter of James that we have in our New Testament. And so he was actually, at least the way that history records it, he was 94 and beaten and stoned. And so he was martyred, Matthias, Andrew, and it records some others. For example, like Peter, and probably the most famous thing it talks about with Peter is that Peter was actually crucified upside down. So because he didn't believe he was worthy to be crucified in the same manner that Christ was, so he was actually asked to be crucified upside down when they crucified him.
Like the crossbar was on the lower part?
Correct.
Oh.
Yep. And then of
Wouldn't
course,
that not work though?
What's that? Oh, because of like the weight?
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. That's the way the history records it.
Did they nail him in some other places too?
Yeah. I mean, well, obviously he would have been nailed to his feet upward, right?
Yeah, but you could just pull your feet and rip your feet.
Yeah, but
and fall over.
Yeah, but obviously that's not what happened.
All right.
Yeah, so and I don't know how much quicker it would have, died. And then it talks about Jude being crucified in 72, and then one of the interesting ones is Thomas. And there's because the history says that Thomas, who we often refer to as Doubting Thomas, but Thomas actually went to India and he was killed there in India. Okay. And so like when I was visiting India, that was a really big thing. Thomas came to India and Thomas was martyred here. And so that it records that he actually was like a spear went through him, that someone killed him with a spear. And so, and same thing, with the other martyrs of Luke and Simon, and then eventually John. Now, the interesting thing about John is that, again...
Which John? First John?
John that wrote...
Third John?
John that was with Jesus, the brother of James, that wrote the Gospel of John, that wrote 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and that wrote the book of Revelation.
Oh.
That John. So...
Is he the one in Revelation? Or is
yes.
That... Okay.
Yes. And so... Yeah, so he's giving his account of it. And so it's actually said about John that he was actually thrown into this cauldron of boiling oil, but then like miraculously, basically just got up and walked out,
and then did a revelation.
Yeah, right, and then like escaped, without injury, but then died later on,
like Shamrock, Meshach, and to bed we go, or whatever their names were.
Okay. Okay. Well,
kind of like that.
You got the story close. names a little off.
How they were burning and
like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Yeah, those guys.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, so yes, very similar to that.
Okay.
Yep. And then it records Barnabas being killed, and so and then it talks about like the history of Christian persecutions and martyrdoms that happened under like Nero, for example. That was like the first big kind of like widespread persecutions of the Christians.
Why did the Romans have such cool names for people?
Like Nero?
Yeah.
It's
just dope.
They just had different names.
I like it.
Okay.
I mean, he was a bad guy, I guess.
Right.
But,
yeah. But like then the next one was under Domitian. And so
see, that's cool.
Yeah.
And Constantine, that's a cool name.
Right. Yeah, they definitely had different names.
Yeah, I like it.
So, all right. So anyway, I'm not going to go through all of it, but so it gives a long history, an account of individuals who died. So if anyone's interested, I would definitely go check out Fox's Book of Martyrs.
Okay.
Because it gives a great, kind of history overview of individuals that did die. Probably one of the more famous ones that died like in our modern day.
Let me guess. The one who went to somewhere in South America or Africa or somebody, and he was a missionary, and they cut him and his family up and threw it in the river or something.
That might have happened too.
Okay.
But obviously, and you may get the stories a little mixed up here, but Jim Elliot, I don't know if you've
guy.
Yeah,
they made a movie about him.
Into the Spear.
That's
yes. So
that
it wasn't he and his family. It was he and his friends.
Okay.
Yeah,
that was like a whole thing in the 90s, and everyone was like, "You have to watch this movie."
Right. So I actually know the guy who is the casting director of that movie, by the way.
Oh.
And they actually filmed down there on location.
Cool.
And because the villagers who
wait, really?
Yeah, the village that ended up killing Jim Elliot and the other missionaries that were with him,
they wanted to play themselves.
They actually came to know Christ.
Oh.
Yeah. And so it's a really fun, the story is phenomenal. So if you get a chance actually to watch the movie called Into the Spear, go watch it. It's an incredible account of what happens with Jim Elliot, some other missionaries who were killed for sharing their faith. They were martyred.
That movie shouldn't have come out.
Why?
Because it turned a lot of people off from wanting to be missionaries, including myself.
Okay. You just kind of ended
I ain't going.
Right. Well, at least you knew that's not what I wanted. You didn't want to sign up for that, so that's good. So, and then a little bit more modern, like getting into like the late 90s, 1999 to be exact. Graham Staines, who was a missionary from Australia, and you've probably maybe not heard of this.
No.
He and his two sons were actually burned alive in India.
Okay.
And
they didn't run out and not die.
Yeah. Well, actually, they actually trapped them in their car.
Oh.
Yeah, and set the car on fire, and
that's not believable.
And they were burned alive.
Those things unlock from the inside.
Yeah, they wouldn't let him get out. So Graham and his two sons died. And actually, so the very first time I went to India, we were in Calcutta, and I was doing a conference there with about 100 pastors from all over India. And there was this group of pastors, and they were just different.
There's that much Christianity in India?
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah. Yeah, you have the state in India that Thomas is kind of historically thought to have gone to is almost completely Christian.
Oh.
Yeah. But obviously Hinduism is the primary religion there. But yeah, no, you have Christians all throughout. But so I was at this conference. There's about 100 pastors gathered, but there's this one group of guys that were just all different. Like, I can't explain it. I just had this joy and this like excitement about life and being there and being together. Like, they literally just like stood out. Like, it was just it was interesting. So I actually went to the director of the conference and I said, "Hey, what's the deal? Well, basically, what's the deal with these guys? Like, they're carrying themselves differently than everybody else. There's this like joy about them. Like, what's the deal with them?" And he just looked at me and he said, "Oh, they're from Orissa." Like that was supposed to mean something, I guess, to me. I just didn't know at the time, and I said, I don't know what that means. And he said, "Well, Orissa is the place where missionary Graham was killed with his 2 sons.
Oh.
And I didn't know the story. And so then Pastor Marcus begins to tell me the story, and I'm listening to the story, and he's like, and so these guys, when they got on the train to come to here, so at that point in time, kind of radical Hinduism was really growing in India at that point, especially in some of these areas.
What does radical Hinduism do?
Kill Christians.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Same, and kill Muslims.
I didn't know they could be radical.
Yeah.
I thought they just sat quietly.
Right. No, there's a radical version of Hinduism. Okay. Yeah, that has become violent. And so anyway, so he was telling me about them, and he said, so when these pastors, it was like a big group, it was like, I don't know, 6 guys or so. He said when they got on their train to come here, they honestly don't know if when they go back, if they'll be killed right there on the spot. They don't know if their families are safe right now. They don't know. And yet they were still like, they had this like joy that was just like unreal. And he said, but it's, they don't know if tomorrow's promised. They know they may end up being killed. Some of their friends have been killed. They, and they're willing to go and die for Jesus. And it was so like unbelievably just humbling to sit there and hear the stories, listen about these guys. And so that was kind of like my first encounter with, hearing stories and being around some people who experienced some stuff. And then several years ago, I met another missionary from Operation Mobilization. His name is Gary Witherall. And Gary was friends with a couple of missionaries from OM that I'm close with. And so I got to meet Gary. And Gary and his wife were actually in Lebanon after 9/11, or like when 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And they stayed there afterwards. And his wife ended up being shot and killed by individuals who they knew that they were sharing the gospel.
Oh. And
they didn't like the fact that young Muslims in particular were hearing the gospel. They didn't like that. And they knew the risk. They knew that there was a high chance of some type of retaliation against them. And one morning, I believe it was a morning, while Bonnie, that's Gary's wife, was at the clinic. They did a health clinic as well. While she was at the clinic, she was shot. Someone came in and shot and killed her. And so that was 2002. And then just again, getting to hear Gary, getting to hear his story, talking to him, he shared with a group of us. And anyway, it's really powerful to hear these type of stories. And most people probably have never heard of Gary Witherall or Bonnie, his wife Bonnie, who passed away and or was martyred. And you may not have heard of Graham and his sons, but reality is like martyrdom is happening presently throughout the world, and it's happening right now. I mean, and there's countries that the individuals know that if they are following Jesus, that their literal lives are in jeopardy because of it. And
like ours are right now.
Yet, nope, nothing like America. And it does put, for me, it does put the hysteria of what's going on in America into perspective, and going, we probably shouldn't be that quite that hysterical. So
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
We're on the internet. Internet makes martyring people easier.
Apparently. So, all right. One last person I'm going to bring up.
Okay.
He's kind of debated of whether he's a martyr or not. So his name is Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and maybe you never heard of him.
Nope.
So Dietrich, man. So there's actually a movie coming out the day after Thanksgiving called Bonhoeffer, and I think it's titled Pastor, Spy, Assassin, something like that.
He's from World War II.
Yeah. Yep. And so, lived during that time. Yeah. And so, so he was a German pastor and theologian. He was executed in 1945 as Germany is beginning to fall. Okay. And so And he actually is considered a martyr by several different denominations. I know the Anglican Church, the UMC, consider him a martyr.
Okay.
But he was arrested actually and executed not for his faith per se, but because of a failed assassination attempt on Hitler. So he had joined with a group of others that had devised an assassination plan on Hitler, and it was exposed. He was arrested.
Hitler was a martyr.
And no.
So the martyr in the movie was Hitler.
No.
For believing what he believed.
No. Just no. Terrorist. All right, or whatever we want to say. All right. So he was part of the plan, but he was doing so actually, whether you agree with him or not agree with him, because of his view of faith and church and what he saw was happening. Not just even for the church, but for the Jews as well. Like, he just believed that what was happening required this kind of radical step and intervention. And so it's questioned if he was actually executed for his faith, which would have made him a martyr.
Okay.
Or was he executed, again, for what would have been deemed like a political stand, right? So which would not necessarily make him a Christian martyr.
Hey, when you write about killing me, could you put faith first and tried to execute Hitler second? Because I want to be talked about longer.
Right. No, but Bonhoeffer was awesome, dude. There's a book out there by Eric Metaxas called Bonhoeffer, and it's, I don't know, 500-600 pages long.
What denomination was he?
Was Bonhoeffer? That's a good question. What was the name of that? I'm guessing it was just the German Christian Church, but I'll look that up. But Bonhoeffer, the most well-known book is called Cost of Discipleship.
He wrote it?
Yeah, he wrote that.
Oh.
And so he wrote several books.
Oh.
And he was a young guy. He was still in his 30s when he was killed. Was a brilliant individual, actually came and studied here in America for a while, and then went back to Germany. And at one point, everything was happening with the church, and he was in England, and he came back. And anyway, it was just so interesting. But anyway, his life is amazing. His stances were incredible for what he believed about
his stances,
his stance on Christianity, his stance for Christianity, his stance for discipleship. So he actually blamed a lot of what was going on in Germany at that time and the rise of Nazism with the confessing church not making a stand and doing what the church should have been doing and making disciples.
And not Nazis.
Well, yeah. And then a lot of the churches folded or started to kind of bend a knee, if you were, to Hitler and to Nazism in the sense of compromising.
What a bunch of maybe the most failed Christians ever.
Oh, in Germany?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And so
besides the ones that killed Jesus.
Yeah. So he was one of the founding members of the Confessing Church. And that was what I kind of, and so they were very much like an anti-Nazi group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, but also what they believed, not just anti-Nazis,
far left
they
extremists.
Were that. No. Yeah. Well, the Nazis were the crazies. But anyway, the standing in and also standing in more orthodox Christian faith. And so, believing the Bible was true. Because they're in Germany, you have to understand, like in Germany in the 1800s, liberal theology had really swept through the country. Mm-hmm. And so it had gone from a country that was very orthodox in its faith and belief, and now became very liberal in their understanding of the scriptures. And Bonhoeffer was wanting to kind of move the church back to being more biblical in its basis, more orthodox.
Okay.
And so, and hence the Confessing Church, which also...
But he also wanted to kill Hitler.
But at the end of the day, he thought that was best. Okay. So anyway, Bonhoeffer is an interesting one. Go catch the movie, the day after Thanksgiving. I can't wait to go watch it.
Cool.
Yeah. So anyway, those are some martyrs.